You are listening to the Toxic Mold Podcast with my husband, Steve Worsley, the toxic mold expert and your number one source for mold consulting and mitigation in the USA. Here is episode 141. Are air purifiers a good fix for toxic mold exposure?
Before we get started on this episode, a short or not so short disclaimer. While all attempts have been made to verify the content provided in this podcast, neither the podcaster or the producers assume any responsibility for errors, omissions, or alternative interpretations of the issues discussed herein. All information stated in this podcast is the opinion of Steve Worsley. Steve Worsley is a mold specialist with over 20 years of experience in the construction and mold industry. The Toxic Mold Podcast is for information sharing purposes only. The views expressed are those of the podcaster and his alone. These views should not be taken as expert instruction or commands. While there may be references to medical conditions and symptoms, all solo podcast episodes are the opinion of Steve Worsley, and any medical questions or concerns shall be addressed with the appropriate licensed medical professional or professionals. As the podcaster refers to different mold types, please be aware that Steve Worsley is not a microbiologist, and questions concerning mold specifics should be answered by the appropriate professional. The listener is 100% responsible for his or her own actions. You can check out Steve's books on Amazon about mold and dealing with mold in your home at amazon.com/author/Steve Worsley. And if you're interested in scheduling a mold consultation, over the phone consultation with Steve, you can be sure to find out more about those and his availability at cnccontractorservices.com. Now, let's get to the episode.
Welcome to a brand new episode of the Toxic Mold Podcast. It is 2022, Steve. Here we are. Brand new year.
January 17th.
That's right.
A few weeks in, and someone just had a birthday.
I know.
25th birthday.
Yes, and I celebrate all month long, so it's a month of joy.
That's crazy. Didn't talk about it in the last two episodes.
Yeah, exactly. I look forward to January every single year. So we are talking about air purifiers and whether or not they are a good fix for toxic mold exposure. Now, I don't get the link between air purifiers and toxic mold. Why would people think that it's a good fix?
Well, a lot of times, one of the questions asked during consultations, a lot of it, people ask, once they've gone through the mitigation process and, fix the mold, fix the defects, just to maintain a healthy home, they say, do you recommend an air purifier? And if you do, what brand? When it goes back to the question, can an air purifier fix a mold concern? Obviously it can't. It's, it's like you're trying to fog something. Well, you can't fog if you're not going to fix the mold itself. So yeah, a lot of people, we have two air purifiers. We only have one in the house. We hardly ever use it, but we have access to air scrubbers. So if we really have an air quality concern, it's easier for us. But I'm sure a lot of our listeners have air purifiers for several reasons. And I guess my point is it's not going to fix your mold problem.
Well, and if the mold is, let's say, on sheetrock or underneath the floors, purifying the air, does it spread the mold infestation?
It could very easily.
Okay.
Yep. You could actually be, so let's just say you have a forced air system, which is what we have. We just don't have built-in AC. But an HVAC system is, most common these days. It's forced air. They have a condensing unit outside for air conditioning. Well, those, you might not be kicking up certain areas of the house as far as air quality. But if you have an air purifier, let's just say, we put it somewhere where it's by a return air vent, you could be kicking up those mold spores and then it's getting sucked through your whole HVAC system. Does that make sense?
Wow.
My point is you could be disturbing mold spores that typically wouldn't be disturbed with your HVAC system.
Okay.
If you have an air purifier.
And an air purifier is meant to cleanse the air, but if you're kicking up mold spores that are from a mold infestation, you're actually circulating.
Yeah. It gets kind of complex. you could be kicking up the mold spores just because you have a dog running around.
Okay.
From you walking, from a window open. So I'm not saying an air purifier would cause problems per se, but it's not going to fix your mold problem. And most people, that's what they want. They want to go spend $200-$300 on a nice air purifier, and they think that's going to fix their air quality issues, when that's, it's a great thing to have an air purifier, but their air quality issues are probably from other things, VOCs, mold, whatever. So my point is it's not a fix. And a lot of people look at it that way.
And
if
it's
that makes
not.
sense.
And so do you recommend air purifiers to people?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I tell people, if you've gone through all the proper steps for mitigation, you've done post-mitigation air testing, we're not seeing anything. We've done a VPA. We can't see any water stains. We don't have any concerns, with mold. Then I say, yeah, get an air purifier. It's not going to hurt anything. But just make sure that you're not using that to mask the mold problem you already have.
That makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. Now, so then if you do at times recommend an air purifier, what brand would you recommend?
I don't recommend a brand.
Okay.
So I don't, just like when people ask me, do you know a good mold inspector in Pennsylvania? I don't recommend anything. And we try to, we say, company names, but I try to stay away from using, certain brands and names, just because, let's just say I recommended a certain type and our listeners go out and buy that type. Like I could tell them the kind we use, we use what's called a Filter Queen. If they'll go out and buy one and think it's going to fix their mold problem, and then it doesn't, then they go, well, is it Filter Queen or is it Steve that's, not giving us the right information? Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
So I just prefer not to. Now, I asked people, have you looked into them? Do you have one? And then once they give me the information, I just had a client that he had an air purifier. He gave me the brand name. I went to their site, and right off the bat, I don't want to say picked apart the air purifier, but I looked for reasons that I had concerns with the brand. Meaning, I went to their website and they didn't even have, they just showed, it was a paper filter, but it didn't say how many microns and the size of microns and the percentages of those that would be filtered. Like, they couldn't give me information that I want to see, like this kind of stuff. I mean, that's a MERV chart, and it just has a bunch of numbers, and, most people that don't know much about it, they don't care. But I look at stuff like that. Well, this website I went to for that brand, and he paid like $400 or $500 for it. I didn't tell him, well, it's not going to work. I just said, well, here's my concerns. What type of filters can you, upgrade those filters to get VOCs out of the air? Like, what's it going to filter? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And you can have filtration systems that are through like a HEPA filter or UV light. There's just different ways that it can filtrate the air. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense.
And we've talked about it before, but there's HVAC systems that have a electrostatic, I think is what it's called. And I apologize to our listeners if I said it wrong, but more or less it runs through, the filter it runs through is like a bug zapper. And remember when we talked about that, when the furnace first kicks on, it sounds like a bug zapper.
Exactly.
Because it's like ionizing whatever, particles are coming through that filtration system. There's some that it's just like UV light that does it. So, there's just too many variables, I guess, to go back to giving a name brand. I just, certain things suit certain people for different reasons, if that makes sense.
That does make sense. Okay. So when I think about how people might use air filters, are people using an air filter, like one air filter per room, one air filter per floor? How have you typically seen people use them in a house, whether it's one floor or multi-floor?
For the area. A lot of it would depend on the size of the air purifier.
Okay.
So like the ones we have, you can use those, like we can put it in the living room and it would help, depending on where you put it, could help with the living room, dining room, and kitchen areas. Okay. If you have a really small one, obviously that would be just for one room. But I would say for the most part, it would seem odd to me. So I'm going to put like my inspector hat on. It would seem odd to me if I went into a house and I saw air purifiers in every room,
Okay.
that would be a red flag to me.
Okay.
Like, why are you doing this? Does that make sense?
So then should it be one air purifier per floor?
No, I'm not. I guess I'm not going to tell them how many they should have,
Mm-hmm.
but if you have to have that many, I guess I would pretty much say most people would go one per floor.
Okay.
And, if they're spending a lot of time, let's just say in their office during the day, they take that air purifier with them in their bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times you're not running it 24/7. And so it's kind of hard to answer that question because we don't know what size our clients or our listeners are going to buy. But my point behind the one in every room would seem, for me, other people maybe not, but for me, I think it was a little odd if they had one in every room. Because, it'd be like, do your carpets stink? If your dog's been pissing in the carpet? Like, to me, it tells me there's a reason. And if they say, well, we just want to keep the air clean, I'd be like, well, okay. I totally understand that. But why is the air so dirty?
So then let me ask you this. What, because to me, an air purifier, to me, it sounds like if you open your windows and your doors, you get a better, you purify your air better than if you have an air purifier. So It doesn't the old fashioned way work as well as a purifier?
Well, if we're comparing apples to apples, no.
Okay.
Just because opening your windows, you don't have HEPA filters on your windows.
Okay.
So it's just passive airflow.
Okay.
So but if you're asking what would I do personally in the summertime, or even some of our listeners live in the South where it's beautiful this time of year, or, Arizona, wherever, I would open my windows well before we would turn on an air purifier. And the reason why is we're getting fresh air. We're circulating the air. Now, if you're using that air purifier because you do have indoor air quality concerns, say, VOCs, pets, or pet urine, mold, you would want to use the air purifier because that's what you're using it for.
Exactly.
Opening windows and doors isn't going to do that. So, but yeah, I mean, I kind of didn't answer your question, but me personally, if there's no indoor air quality concerns that I have, absolutely I'd open the windows because you're getting fresh air.
Well, and I know you've done a podcast episode on this, but I've heard of people who believe that having an abundance of plants in their house purifies the air. There are plants that are actually anti-mold.
Yeah.
What do you think of the plant people who swear that having tons of plants throughout their house basically purifies the air?
They're entitled to their opinion just like I am. And they would give me their reasons to have it. And if they just said to clean the air, I would be like, well, why are you cleaning it? I would ask a bunch of questions. Okay. But then I'd explain to them why I don't think it's a good idea. Because when plants, like when the leaves die and fall to the soil in the base or wherever you've got it planted, that there are mold spores that are created or that come off of that dead leaf that can be unhealthy to the humans, could be unhealthy to the pets. Watering the plants, do they have drip pans below them? All sorts of stuff. Last month was Christmas, and with Christmas trees, are you when you have to fill up your Christmas tree base every day full of water for a live Christmas tree? That would tell me that your trees shouldn't be that thirsty for water, or shouldn't require it. Is there a hole in the bottom, and are you just pouring water right into the carpet? Mm-hmm. So for those that have a lot of plants, and I've dealt with a lot of people that do, and I can tell you this specifically, a house with 0 plants versus a house with house plants, their air samples are way different. Okay. And it's because we are picking up mold spores from the, dead leaves in the soils, all sorts of stuff. There could be anything. You could get into allergen issues because, plants, and I'm not a plant guy, obviously. We don't even have a live plant in the house, do we?
No.
Okay. I just want to make sure. But, there could be bugs associated with those plants. There's all sorts of things that could come along. But for our listeners that love their plants and think that it helps, that's great. I'm not saying you shouldn't have them. I just think there are risks that come along with that.
Absolutely. And so at the end of the day, it still boils back to what you said at the beginning of the episode, which is air purifiers, plants opening windows. If you haven't actually dealt with the core issue that's causing the mold infestation, those things are not going to fix it.
Yep. Then it's, I'm sure a lot of our listeners have heard this. We talk about it. It's you have to do a root cause analysis and figure out why do I want an air purifier? That's the first question that should come to your mind. Well, because you want fresher air to breathe. That's great, but you got to dive a little deeper. So, like you said, it could be something simple.
Yeah.
So you can't just grab an air purifier at Home Depot or wherever and think that that's going to fix your indoor air quality issues.
Exactly. So what's your call to action for people?
So we were talking about air purifiers and how they're, how the air is filtered on it. For those of our listeners that have air purifiers or furnaces, any type of filters in your home, go check them right now. Make sure that they're nice and clean. You could have things like AC units that go in the windows. It's a little cold this time of year for that, but we have listeners that are on the other side of the globe, so it's summertime there, not winter like it is here. But anything that has anything that's an air mover that has a filter, make sure you check that and clean it and change it out and do whatever you've got to do.
Awesome. And then if people have questions, they can always go to cnccontractorservices.com and they can check out the mold consultations.
Exactly.
There you go. We'll catch you on the next episode.
Prevent toxic mold exposure before it gets in your home. Download Steve's free mold investigation checklist at tinyurl.com/CNC mold checklist. Again, download Steve's free mold investigation checklist at tinyurl.com/CNC mold checklist.